Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Netanyahu to propose plan to annex Gaza. So Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, reported on Monday that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to propose to his political security cabinet a U.S.-supported plan to begin annexing the Gaza Strip. The report said the plan is being proposed to appease Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and prevent him from quitting the government. Smotrich is unhappy with the recent steps Netanyahu has taken to slightly increase the humanitarian aid shipments entering Gaza amid the international outrage over the starvation deaths caused by the Israeli siege. So Smotrich isn't happy about that. So Netanyahu is ready to start annexing, actually officially taking over parts of Gaza. So under this plan, Israel will declare that it is giving Hamas a few days to agree to a ceasefire, and the conditions of the ceasefire are unclear. As we know, Hamas's position has been that it would release the remaining Israeli captives in exchange for a permanent ceasefire. Israel has not even entertained the idea of a permanent ceasefire. The deal that's been on the table is for a 60-day ceasefire with some vague commitments toward working toward a permanent one. And that was a major sticking point, was that Hamas was looking for stronger guarantees for a permanent deal. So we don't know what kind of ceasefire Israel is going to propose here, but it sounds like the idea is to say, this is the deal that's on the table, take it or leave it, or we're going to start annexing Gaza. And I doubt whatever Israel proposes that Hamas is going to agree to. And so if Hamas does not agree to the proposal, Israel will then begin annexing the territory within Gaza. It will start by annexing the buffer zone that it created along Gaza's border with Israel and areas in northern Gaza, with the ultimate goal of annexing the entire Palestinian territory. And I do believe this has been the goal all along. I don't know if the Israeli government has thought it would be able to pull it off all along, but I do believe this is their ultimate goal. What they want to do is kick all the Palestinians out, ethnic cleansing, and completely take over the territory. And it looks like they might be making another major step in that direction. So the Haaretz report said that according to details Netanyahu has already presented to government ministers, the plan has received approval from the Trump administration. Netanyahu conveyed that Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer presented the proposal to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and that it has the approval of the White House. And since the U.S. and Israel quit ceasefire talks last week, what's this rhetoric that we've seen from President Trump? He appears to be suggesting that Israel needs to escalate military operations, saying that they need to finish the job in Gaza. And he also said some other vague things, like in one comment, he said that Israel needs to make a decision. They're going to have to make a big decision. And I don't want to say what it is, but they're going to have to make a big decision, kind of being very vague about it. But so there's a chance there that this is what he's referencing, to them actually officially declaring these parts of Gaza and this what they call a buffer zone that they created. It's, again, around the Gaza-Israel border, and it cuts into Gaza's territory. And in those areas, they've completely flattened everything. They've destroyed every building in there. So they can start by declaring that territory is now part of Israel. And this is something, if you read antiwar.com or listen to this show, we were talking about this last year, that this buffer zone was clearly a step toward annexing and establishing Jewish settlements in Gaza. And sources told Haaretz that Smotrich told Netanyahu that he would judge by actions, and that if the annexation plan moves forward, that he would remain in the government for the time being. And Smotrich and other Israeli ministers have spoken openly about their desire for an Israeli takeover of Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of its Palestinian population. Just last week, Smotrich attended a Gaza annexation event, a conference that was held at the Israeli Knesset, and he said that Israel will occupy Gaza and make it an inseparable part of Israel. And this event was titled the Gaza Riviera, From Vision to Reality, which is a nod to President Trump's rhetoric, him calling for a U.S. takeover of Gaza, saying he'll make it the Riviera of the Middle East. And so, all that stuff that Trump has said about that, because his plan involves expelling all the Palestinians, that has really emboldened the Smotriches and the Ben-Gvirs in the Israeli government, and Netanyahu and Katz, the defense minister. You see it in their rhetoric whenever they talk about this stuff. Now they call it the Trump plan when they're talking about committing ethnic cleansing. And at this event last week, Smotrich said that Israel now has the green light from the President of the United States to turn Gaza into a prosperous strip and a resort town, Smotrich said. And Smotrich said that a proposed plan to relocate the Palestinians will serve as a means of facilitating the settlement of Gaza, and that the annexation could start with northern Gaza, just like this plan that Netanyahu is now proposing. And Netanyahu is also openly in favor of expelling the Palestinians from Gaza. Back in May, Netanyahu said that enacting the Trump plan, as he called it, was a condition for ending Israel's genocidal war. And when he says the Trump plan, he means getting all the Palestinians out, also known as ethnic cleansing. And Netanyahu also told a Knesset committee that the IDF was destroying homes in Gaza so that Palestinians had nowhere to return to. And so, again, this is what I believe has been the ultimate goal of the Israeli government, and now they believe that they can pull it off, or at least start taking some of the territory that they've already cleared everything and destroyed everything. And so we'll see what happens if in the coming days, if we see Israel make some kind of ultimatum to Hamas. And it does look like this plan, this strategy just has the complete support of President Trump. And the next one here, so Trump acknowledges that there is real starvation in Gaza. So on Monday, President Trump acknowledged that there was real starvation in the Gaza Strip. Comments that came after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed there was no starvation despite the daily malnutrition deaths that have been caused by the U.S.-backed Israeli siege. So on Monday, Netanyahu put out this video claiming that there was no starvation happening in Gaza at all. And this is what we see many Israel defenders online claiming. And President Trump told reporters, quote, "That's real starvation stuff that I see. You can't fake that," end quote. And Trump said that the U.S. would become even more involved with getting aid into Gaza, although the U.S. aid system there is the GHF, which have established these aid distribution sites that have become death traps for Palestinians. But Trump said a lot of stuff. He was in Scotland at a Trump golf resort meeting with the British Prime Minister, talking to reporters all day. So he was just kind of throwing so many different things out there. But earlier in the day, Trump was asked if he agreed with Netanyahu's claim that there was no starvation in Gaza. And he said, quote, "Based on television, I would say not particularly because those children look very hungry," end quote. He also said that Israel has a lot of responsibility for the starvation and must work to get more food into Gaza. And again, there's no sign here, even though he's acknowledging that the starvation, saying that there's got to be more done about it. No sign that he's considering pressuring Israel for a ceasefire or anything like that. Another thing he said on Monday was that a ceasefire was possible, but he said Israel has to end it. And he said, quote, "Hamas doesn't want to give the hostages. I told Bibi that he will have to now maybe do it in a different way," end quote. So again, saying Hamas doesn't want to hand over the hostages, even though they're willing to do that for a permanent ceasefire. And this shows that Trump is not willing to put the pressure on Netanyahu to make that happen. So he will continue supporting this genocide in Gaza. That's what it looks like, at least. Hopefully, something changes, but I'm just not optimistic for the prospect of any kind of ceasefire or anything like that. So the next one here, Israeli rights group says Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. So two leading Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel, issued reports on Monday that conclude Israel is committing the crime of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. And I put a picture in here that's pretty rough of children who were killed by Israeli airstrikes earlier this month. Just a heads up as I scroll down here. But so this report marks the first time that Israeli rights groups have stated that Israel is conducting genocide, a conclusion that's been reached by many other international rights organizations and genocide scholars, including Israeli genocide scholars, Holocaust scholars. So the B'Tselem report said, quote, an examination of Israel's policy in the Gaza Strip and its horrific outcomes, together with statements by senior Israeli politicians and military commanders about the goals of the attack, leads to the unequivocal conclusion that Israel is taking coordinated action to intentionally destroy Palestinian society in the Gaza Strip. In other words, Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, end quote. And the report was titled Our Genocide. So the Physicians for Human Rights report said that evidence shows a deliberate, quote, a deliberate and systematic dismantling of Gaza's health and life-sustaining systems through targeted attacks on hospitals, obstruction of medical aid and evacuations, and the killing and detention of healthcare personnel, end quote. They said Israel's committing 3 core acts that are defined in the Genocide Convention, including killing members of a group, causing them serious bodily or mental harm, and deliberately inflicting on them conditions of life calculated to bring about the group's destruction in whole or in part. B'Tselem strongly condemned Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel, but said that it did not justify Israel's genocidal assault. They said, quote, our analysis shows how the Israeli government has cynically exploited the trauma experienced by many Israelis and used it to carry out genocide and ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip. One crime does not justify another, certainly not the mass killing of civilians or an attempt to erase and destroy an entire group, end quote. All right, so the next one here, getting into the situation in Gaza. So Israeli forces kill 98 in Gaza over 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that Israeli forces killed at least 98 Palestinians over the previous 24-hour period as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli strikes continued and more aid seekers were gunned down by the IDF. The health ministry said that the bodies of another 2 Palestinians were found in the rubble. So one of the attacks included strikes that hit a house and neighboring tents in Al-Mawasi, southern Gaza. At least 12 people were killed in the strike, including Suwayda al-Shahar, who was 7 months pregnant at the time. So this is a woman who was killed in the airstrike. And according to AP, after she was killed, her baby girl was delivered in a complex emergency C-section at the Nasser hospital. And the baby was placed in an incubator and was breathing with assistance from a ventilator, but died later in the day. So they were able to get the baby out while she was still alive, but unfortunately she didn't make it. So just another horror story in Gaza. And another strike in the area hit a house in Khan Yunis, killing at least 11 people. And Nasser hospital officials said that more than half of the dead were women and children. And Israeli strikes hit targets across Gaza, despite Israel announcing what they're calling tactical pauses to allow more humanitarian aid to get in, but they were bombing just across the whole place. And not clear if that includes the places where they say that there was tactical pauses or within the time frame, but the strikes just continued heavily. And, we haven't seen any sign that the attacks have eased due to these pauses that they announced. The health ministry said that Israeli forces killed 25 aid seekers and wounded 237 over that 24 hours as well. So that's the violent deaths. The next one here, 14 more Palestinians starved to death in Gaza. So Gaza's health ministry said that at least 14 more Palestinians have died of starvation caused by the U.S.-backed Israeli siege. The ministry wrote on Telegram, quote, Gaza Strip hospitals recorded 14 new deaths in the past 24 hours due to famine and malnutrition. This brings the total number of deaths from famine and malnutrition to 147, including 88 children. A source at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City told Al Jazeera that among the dead was Mohammed Ibrahim Adas, an infant who died of malnutrition due to the shortage of baby formula. Babies have been especially vulnerable since malnourished mothers are unable to produce breast milk. The latest starvation deaths come after Israel announced several steps to allow more aid to enter Gaza, including airdropped aid, allowing more aid trucks to enter, and enacting these tactical pauses. Israel took these steps in the face of significant international pressure over its starvation campaign. The UN and other aid groups have said there's been some progress in getting more aid into Gaza, but warn the humanitarian catastrophe cannot be averted unless all restrictions are lifted and there is a complete ceasefire. UNRWA, the UN's Palestinian Relief Agency, said, quote, opening all the crossings and flooding Gaza with assistance is the only way to avert further deepening of starvation among the people of Gaza. What's needed is at least 500 or 600 trucks of basics every day. Meanwhile, we call once again for a long-term ceasefire as part of an agreement that would bring respite to starving people, an uninterrupted flow of basic supplies, as well as the release of all hostages, end quote. So again, the full ceasefire is what's needed to bring for a real humanitarian relief effort while you have people on the brink. And we're seeing these deaths continuing every single day. All right, so the next one here, Israeli settlers launch attack on Christian West Bank village of Taybeh. So Jewish settlers in the Israeli-occupied West Bank launched an overnight attack on Taybeh, the last village in the Palestinian territory that is entirely populated by Christians. So the attack began around 2:20 a.m. on Monday morning when settlers entered the town and set 3 cars on fire, threw stones at homes, attempted to light one house on fire, and spray-painted threatening graffiti written in Hebrew. When young residents from the village emerged to defend themselves, the settlers fled. The Israeli military arrived about an hour later and no arrests were made. You see this picture here of one of the cars that was torched by these settlers. And this is Taybeh. It continues to come under attack despite international attention after settlers set a fire next to the historic Church of St. George that was built in the 5th century. Residents were able to put out the fire before it damaged the church, but the incident prompted 3 priests based in the town to issue a plea for help amid the growing settler attacks. And a week after that fire, Christian leaders from the region visited Taybeh and they issued a statement strongly condemning settler violence in Taybeh as well as across the West Bank. And they also strongly condemned the Israeli government's support for this settler violence. And then even Mike Huckabee made the visit and issued a statement saying that the attack on the church was an act of terror and a crime. He didn't name the perpetrators, but it was still surprising considering his support for the Israeli occupation and the expansion of settlements. So the purpose of the attacks on Taybeh and these villages, they're trying to terrorize these people to get them to flee because they want to steal their land. I mean, that's the purpose of these terror tactics. And that was really made clear in Taybeh, where settlers actually erected a sign, a big billboard that said, "You have no future here." So this is, again, making it very clear what their goal is. All right, so the next one here, Trump and Israel renew threats to attack Iran. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So President Donald Trump said that he would wipe out Iran's nuclear program if Tehran continued its enrichment. A day earlier, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz threatened to assassinate the Iranian supreme leader. So lots of threats still coming from the U.S. And Israel. So this is Trump. So he said this when he was in Scotland with Starmer. Quote, Iran's been sending out bad signals, I'll tell you. For a country that just got wiped out, they've been sending very bad signals, very nasty signals, and they shouldn't be doing that. We wiped out their nuclear possibilities. They can start again. If they do, we'll wipe it out faster than you can wave your finger at it. We will do that gladly, openly, and gladly, end quote. And Trump's remarks follow Defense Minister Katz's threat to assassinate Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So he said this on Sunday, quote, I want to send a clear message from here to dictator Khamenei. If you continue to threaten Israel, our long arm will reach Tehran again with even greater power, and this time personally to you too, end quote. So these threats are notable because, we've seen Trump say similar things, but this one is a little more explicit. But what is Iran asking for as a condition for talks with the U.S.? They want guarantees. They want to feel like they're not going to be attacked again. And then you see the U.S., the president, and make these threats, Israel make these threats, not encouraging for the prospect of diplomacy. And Iran is making it clear that they are preparing for more Israeli attacks. They see it as a real threat. They don't trust that the ceasefire is going to hold. And then you see things like this. I think it just makes them, it gives them more motivation to get ready for more attacks and another war. All right, so the next one here, violence continues in Syria's Suwayda, 1,400 confirmed dead. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So in Suwayda in southern Syria, the major fighting has stopped, but there has still been other incidents of violence. And the death toll, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, has reached 1,448, and that includes 258 people summarily executed by the Syrian government HTS forces who went in there and started massacring people. And another thing is that the city right now is essentially under siege, Suwayda, and people are running out of food. And there's been ambushes reported. So it looks like there is, a real potential for a humanitarian crisis in this city. An aid convoy from the Syrian Red Crescent and the International Red Cross did make it through to the area, the one open route. So they were able to get in there. Over 100,000 people have been reported to have been displaced by the fighting. Water has been reported cut in some areas, and food and fuel are in short supply in some places. And there's no timetable for reopening the area, and the situation may continue to worsen. So something to keep an eye on if the Syrian government kind of continues this blockade, essentially, on Suwayda. All right, so the next one here, Yemen announces phase 4 of maritime blockade against Israel. So this article's from The Cradle. So the Yemeni armed forces announced late on July 27th that it has launched a 4th phase of its naval blockade against Israel in support of Gaza. So this is the Houthis forces. They vowed to target the ships of any company that deals with Israeli ports, regardless of its nationality or destination, and in any location. They said that it warns, quote, all companies to immediately cease all dealings with Israeli ports as of the time of the statement's issuance. Otherwise, their ships, regardless of destination, will be subject to targeting in any location that can be reached by our missiles and drones. The Yemeni armed forces calls upon all nations, if they wish to avoid this escalation, they must pressure the enemy to stop its aggression and lift the blockade on the Gaza Strip. No free person on earth can accept what is happening, end quote. And they stress that the military operations will cease immediately once the aggression on Gaza stops and the blockade is lifted. So that is the key to ending the Houthi blockade in the Red Sea. And so they're saying, essentially, if there's any country that's doing any business with Israel shipping-wise, that if they have ships go through the Red Sea or in any area that they can reach, they're going to be targeted. So it seems like they're stepping things up here. And we've seen reports, I don't know if I covered it yesterday, that Israel is considering a major offensive against Yemen, saying that they might really ramp up their attacks on Yemen. And I know they do want the U.S. to start bombing them again, but we haven't seen any signs that the U.S. is moving in that direction, at least for now. Again, the key to all this, ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the blockade. All right, so the next one here, Trump says that Russia has 10 or 12 days to end the war. So President Trump said on Monday that he was giving Russia a new deadline of 10 or 12 days to end the war in Ukraine, and said that he was no longer interested in speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So he said, quote, I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. We just don't see any progress being made, end quote. So on July 14th, Trump said Russia had 50 days to end the war, putting the deadline at September 2nd. At the time, he threatened to impose 100% tariffs on Russia and its major trading partners. The implication is that the U.S. could impose significant tariffs on China and India, which of course would have a big impact on the U.S. and global economy. I mean, I really doubt the U.S. is going to put 100% tariffs on everything from China and India. It doesn't seem realistic, but that is what they're threatening. And then the bill in the Senate calls for 500% tariffs, which is just absurd. So the president said on Monday, so what I'm doing is we're going to do secondary sanctions unless we make a deal, and we might make a deal. I don't know, end quote. And of course, Russia, they've made clear that they're committed to achieving their war goals despite the threats. I mean, if anything, I would think Russia would want the U.S. to do something like this, to put these big tariffs on China and India, because it'll make those two countries just have to trade with Russia even more. I mean, it is like the U.S. is creating this alternative global economic system by itself, just by sanctioning all these countries and everything. So it just seems like a really foolish thing to do. It's not going to move Russia to do anything. But that's what he's threatening. And so when it comes to the prospects of a deal being reached, Russia's not budging, and Zelensky and the Ukrainian leadership, they're not budging, not willing to concede on the territory as long as the U.S. and NATO continue giving them support. And then another thing, so, it's unfortunate that this war hasn't ended, of course. I was hoping that this is one thing Trump would do, would actually really work to end this thing. But one improvement with the Trump administration has been that they've at least been talking to Russia on a high level, which I really think makes the risk of a big escalation go way down. But now Trump is saying that he's not interested in talking with Putin anymore, so there's a chance that that could change. Although I just don't see them cutting off the high-level contact, as the Biden administration did. But Trump said, quote, I'm not so interested in talking anymore. He talks. We have such nice conversations, such respectful and nice conversations, and then people die the following night with a missile going into a town, end quote. And for its part, the Kremlin remains open to dialogue with the U.S. So there's rumors that China is having a big parade, military parade for the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. And there's rumors that, Putin's going to be there. There's rumors that Trump is also going to be there in Beijing. That would be interesting if Trump goes there for that event. And there's a chance that he can meet with Putin if they're both in Beijing at the same time. The Kremlin says it's a possibility. Right now, there's no preparations for it, but if they're both there, then they could potentially meet. All right, so the last story here, North Korea says it has no reason to meet with the South. So this is another one from Kyle. So the sister of North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un said that Pyongyang had no interest in engaging with Seoul. Kim Yo-jong dismissed the steps taken by the new South Korean government as insufficient to change the situation on the Korean peninsula. She said, quote, we clarify once again the official stand that no matter what policy is adopted and whatever proposal is made in Seoul, we have no interest in it, and there is neither the reason to meet nor the issue to be discussed with the ROK, end quote. She acknowledged that the new South Korean government ended some propaganda operations aimed at North Koreans, but said that it was not worthy of appreciation. So she said basically it was described as the first signal for the restoration of confidence. She said, quote, all this is the scourge they have voluntarily invited, and thus it is the issue of themselves no matter how they settle it, and is nothing but a reversible turning back of what they should not have done in the first place. In other words, it is not work worthy of appreciation, end quote. So saying they ended the propaganda thing, they shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. So South Korean President Lee Jae-myung was elected earlier this year, and he, said he's going to try to work to ease tensions, and he did take some steps. So hopefully, North Korea is rejecting it for now, but hopefully kind of the situation just calms down a bit, and it eventually moves in the direction of diplomacy happening. There's been reports of the White House reaching out to North Korea, so hopefully the overtures continue and this eventually leads to some kind of talks. But right now, North Korea is saying that they're not interested. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Thomas Knapp: West Bank, would annexation include citizenship for the annexed? One from Norman Solomon: the genocidal partnership of Israel and the United States. One from Ahmad Abu Shawish: in Gaza, water kills too. And one from Ted Snyder: abandoning Ukraine. Our spotlight from Anel Sheline: civilians die when we send Israel defensive weapons. So please go check all of that out. Lots of stuff in the lower part of the page. One thing we have in our frontline section, Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. So hopefully that sticks. Things flared up pretty good there for a few days, but hopefully it's over for now, but we'll keep an eye on it. But anyway, that is it. You could always support this show by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing. All that stuff really helps out. Follow us on social media. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.